Mike,
And I'm Josh.
and we got a special episode this week because I played a tournament, which is not something I have done in many months. So, and I don't think something you've have you ever played a tournament, Josh?
I've played some online tournaments. I used to play a little bit online, like on like ACR, Ignition, stuff like
Sure.
that. But I never did well. Actually, it's quite interesting because upon signing up to ACR for the very first time in college, I got like a new player free roll, which I
Mhm.
won for like
Oh
200
yeah.
bucks, and then proceeded to not do well in any tournament thereafter. Which was
Funny.
so that's kind of that's the beginning and end of my tournament experience. I don't know that that I would have the patience or time commitment or really enjoy them, but I'd be game to try one eventually.
Yeah, I mean, I really liked them when I first played them. This was, I guess, probably a year ago. I said I haven't played one in months, but it might be more than months. But yeah, when I first played tournaments a year ago, I played a handful, and I really liked them, and I did reasonably well. I won a $60 daily at my local casino, and played a couple like $100 smaller ones. And I don't know, I really like it. It's very different than cash games. It's so much more strategic and careful. There's no like you don't see nearly as much just like random nonsense that you see in cash games, which in some respects is why cash games are fun, is the random nonsense. But it was nice to change up the pace, play a very patient strategy. Um, Obviously, only aces and kings. As I understand it, those are the only hands you're supposed to play in tournaments.
Well,
So that
I was gonna say I've kind of heard that in these sort of low stakes tournaments, really like you could kind of bluff a lot because people just don't want to call off for like large portions of their stack with like marginal hands, which is not true in cash games because people will happily like call because they see you as being bluffy and then like oh I'm wrong, okay, I'll rebuy.
Right, exactly. Like you're absolutely right. You can definitely bluff a lot more in tournaments. You also are actually supposed to pay quite a wider range than you are in cash games, which I did some studying. I mean, this was a 2 day event, and I it was a $200 buy-in with a 50K guarantee. So that was why I wanted to play because it's pretty appealing. And so I day two'd from my flight. There were four flights.
Awesome.
Yeah, and so I was like, so in between that was on Friday, and so in between Friday and today, Sunday, when we're recording this, and I played the day two, which was earlier today. I did some studying on Saturday and tried to brush up on my tournament skills, and realized pretty quickly I'm far out of my depth with ICM and all this stuff. But it was fun. I ended up in 26th for like a $600 payout for a 200 buy and
That's still
buy. So
nice.
it's nice for 10 hours of work. It's not. I could definitely do better playing cash, but it was fun.
Well, it's interesting because I have not really done any tournament studying. Also, I just have no idea how ICM works. But I was listening to an episode of a podcast where they were talking about small blind strategy, and kind of talking about the two main reasons why we don't flat from the small blind, one of which is the rake, which means we're getting an even worse price than we otherwise would be because if we just call, they're going to take money out of the pot. We already have a crap win rate because we're in the worst position. And the other one being that opens tend to be quite big if you're playing a live cash game in
Right.
terms of multiples of the big blind. And both of those things just aren't true in tournaments. If someone opens to 2x, you're actually rather than having money taken out of the pot because of a rake, you actually have more money put into the pot because of the ante. So you just get such a ridiculous price that you're like allowed to just call a stupid amount of hands from the small blind, which
Yeah.
is just something that and I don't actually know the real ranges because, as I've said, I have not studied tournament ranges in a long time, but just sort of like some interesting differences that I came across also. So hopefully you did lots of calling from the small blind and felt vaguely dirty afterwards.
I actually did very little calling from the small blind. I don't know. I'm like a little skeptical of calling wide. I don't know. Maybe it's just my cash game instincts.
And I don't
But
think it's wide, but I think, late position open, you can actually just flat some like marginal hands when you have a decent number of big blinds behind. Just because like the price you're getting, like, oh, if it's only to 2x the big blind, if you just calculate your pot odds, they're actually quite decent.
yeah, fair enough. No, it was definitely interesting. There's a lot to do with it. I ended up punting off, I would say. My loss was a punt. But I don't want to talk about the punt. I do want to talk about some tournament hands, though. And
Awesome.
both of these for your benefit, Josh, specifically, not our listeners, but for you, Josh, these are hands from early on in the tournament, like before, like I think they're both from pre the end of the rebuy period, so there's very little ICM implications, basically.
Awesome. Thank God. Otherwise, I just have to nod and smile through both hands.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds good. So this is
So it's a $200 tournament. And what are the blinds at this level? And what's our effective stack look like?
Yeah. So this first hand that I want to talk about, this is level 4. The blinds are at the 200, 400 to 400 level.
So 200, 400 with a 400 big blind ante?
Correct. Yes. And we're 7-handed right now. Like people, my table for some reason was like frequently short-handed. I don't really know why, but it just was, at least on day 1. And so I'm the effective stack here, and the starting stack was 20,000 chips, and we have a stack of 28,700.
All right, I'm gonna put 29K.
Yeah.
So fairly deep. I mean, over 70 big blinds.
Yeah, that's certainly deep in this tournament, I would say. I was rarely deeper than that at any point in this tournament. So
yep, makes sense.
And I'm under the gun, and I open 10 of diamonds, 10 of spades to 1,000.
Okay, I don't really know how tournament sizing works. But I 2.5 seems. If you told me 2.5 was right, I would nod my head right along with you.
Yeah, when you're sub, as I understand it, when you're sub 30, like 35 big blinds or so, like 30 to 35 range, your sparks just goes like straight 2x, and then but when you're deeper than that, you can go a little bigger. I think probably at the highest depths you're allowed to go the full 3x, but I'm not 100% sure about that. But,
so 1K, fair.
So we go 2.5x, and we get an immediate call to our left from the low jack, who is a middle-aged gentleman rocking out to Pink Floyd on his headphones the whole time. Who I have seen, he's been running hot, but I've also seen him make I saw him make a nice value bet that I would not expect a typical like low stakes cash player to make on the river some orbits ago. So I know he is at least like a little bit capable. I was like, wow, like very few low stakes players do that. So I don't know if he's good, but he made a nice value bet. So.
Okay, good to have some evidence.
Yeah. And so he calls, and the big blind calls as well. The big blind is a total nit. I'm not super worried about him.
Great.
Yeah, he's very he'll call pre-flop and then fold to anything. I've seen him fold many pairs on flops that he'll show and be like, folded this. How do you like that? So,
and then you're like, I like it a lot because now I know that I can just barrel you off literally everything.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got you open 10-10 to 1K. We get 2 callers. And what's the flop look like?
The flop is King of Diamonds, 10 of Clubs, 4 of Hearts.
Bink City.
Yeah, middle set. Looks good. The big blind goes ahead and checks it over to me, as I would expect him to do. And I bet 1,200 here into 36. So I go for straight 1/3. I've been trying to be better about when I've tried it, actually betting 1/3 and not some weird 40%. I don't know.
Yeah, it depends, and it's probably easier to do in a tournament versus cash, where sometimes straight 1/3 is some weird number, and I'm just gonna round it up to the nearest 5 or 10.
Also true, absolutely, yeah. And in a tournament, you can actually do it. So I do bet 1/3 here. I mean, I think I'm out of position here. I think I'm going to be checking this board a lot, to be honest. I would check King Queen here most of the time. I would bet sometimes, but I would check it a lot.
I think I'd be betting King Queen here a lot of the time. I mean, it's a fairly dry board. I think King Queen and King Jack you can bet a lot, and then probably King 9 and below. If you have King 9 suited here, you could probably check. But I think a good top pair you probably bet on this sort of board, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's heads up certainly, but I guess multi-way, I've been really trying to check a lot out of position, I guess. And so I'm trying to use a very polarized strategy in multi-way pots from out of position.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair, but I do think a top pair that is always going to be the best top pair against our opponent's ranges is probably good enough.
That's true. You're probably right. You're probably right. King Queen, it would be a good enough bet. So you're right. But
yeah,
I think
but like King 9, now we're actually like behind some of our opponent's top pairs. We have a lot more pot controlling to do. And obviously, if the 4 were a card that had more connectivity to the board, I'd also probably be more inclined to check, where there are so many turn cards that can drastically change the nuts. But that's not I feel like this board is dry enough where most top pairs I'd be happy to bet. Or not most, but top pair good kicker. I'd be happy to bet.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. So.
But middle set is definitely good enough.
Middle set's very good. I'm definitely betting. I probably don't have bottom set here. I'm probably not opening 4s under the gun.
Yep, I think that's reasonable.
In a tournament, and cash games, I absolutely am. Not that you're supposed to, but come on, people. Like, yeah. You can play pretty wide.
And you're a lot deeper in cash games, too.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. Better.
So, yeah, that's fine. I mean, I'm definitely happy betting 10s. I like small sizings, multi-way. I know we've talked about this before. Betting multi-way is polarized enough that you don't need to go big, basically.
Right. Exactly. So, the low jack calls next to act, which I thought was noteworthy. And the big blind calls as well.
Okay, so we bet a third, and both players call. Well, that's great. We are, we're definitely ahead. Sure. There's not it's tough to it's even tough to think of hands that both players have. I mean, I guess a king and the only real draw on this board is Queen Jack.
Right. Yep. Queen Jack's certainly possible, especially from the big blind. The low jack might not have as many of those combos. So the turn is going to be the 7 of clubs. So we're going to bring in a backdoor flush draw.
Okay. So pretty much, I mean, they're probably, given the multi-way nature, people shouldn't just be floating with a random backdoor flush draw, but players can have King X of clubs or Queen Jack of clubs.
Yeah, and I mean, they're definitely supposed to have things like Jack 9 of clubs, but I'm sure these players don't.
No, probably not. Probably not.
They're probably supposed to have even 9-8 of clubs, things like that.
And Jack 9 is also one of those hands where it's you can kind of make a case for folding because it's makes the crap end of the straight when it does make a straight.
True.
But you probably still should be, probably fine to float. Yeah.
You probably have to have it in your continue range at equilibrium, but most players just aren't.
Yep. Fair enough. So doesn't change the nuts, but it does make the board a little bit wetter.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if someone has Jack 9 here, Jack 9 is a gutter on the flop, so it's a little more probable, and now it's double gutted, for whatever that's worth. But
yeah.
I plan to bet this street. I don't know about if you think that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, of course, we still have the nuts.
Yeah, the effective nuts, and I want to take a large sizing so we can get stacks in on the river.
Sure.
So when the big blind checks, I go ahead and bet 6K.
So if we get called by one player, then there'll pretty much be 19K in the pot. We'll have 21K behind, more or less.
That's correct.
Close. I haven't tracked the effective stack down.
We're basically gonna have a slightly over pot behind.
Yep. So I'm pretty happy with this. If we get one player to call, we're quite satisfied.
Yeah. And indeed, the low jack does call again next to act. So I'm thinking he's pretty strong. I'm thinking he must have his hands. He's pretty face up to me as king queen, probably, and some king jack.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's most likely. He could have a strong draw. If he's got Queen Jack of clubs, maybe he's calling here.
Sure, absolutely, that's true too. Actually, I would say that is definitely a possibility.
2 pairs unlikely, given that we have 2 10s, and he might have King 10 suited, but hard to have King 10 suited.
Yeah, there's one combo is King 10 of spades.
King 10 of hearts. Right.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's one combo, so it's not either way. There's one combo. It's tough. He shouldn't really have King 4. Probably
right.
Have too much
I don't think he would. This particular player ever have King 4. So
okay. So does the big blind fold?
The big blind does fold, unsurprisingly. I'm amazed he stuck around for the flop.
Okay. So we got basically, close to a pot size bet, a little bit more remaining for the river. And if the river comes a clean card, we're happy to jam. Does the river come a clean card?
So the river actually comes the 7 of hearts, giving us a boat.
Bink.
Yeah. I mean, we always have the best hand here, always at this point.
Yes. I'd agree with that.
And so my question here is, should we jam or should we check? Given the background knowledge that we have about our opponent, that he is capable of making some value bets on the river when checked to.
I think we should jam. I mean, I think players are not really, I think if we check jam, it just looks so strong. And if we jam, we're probably going to get called by a king anyway. A lot of the time. I don't know. I think it's tough. It's tough for players to fold kings here because we are repping a pretty thin range. That especially if we think our opponent is likely holding something like king, queen, king, jack. There are not a ton of hands that we have that beat.
Yeah, we have king 10, we have ace king, pocket kings,
and pocket tens.
Pocket tens, and yeah, I guess that's it probably.
Yeah. So that's not a ton of hands that we're repping by jamming. I don't know. I mean, if you want to check here, do you pretty much want to check your whole range?
Well, I don't know if I would check my whole range. I probably wouldn't check ace king here, but I don't know that.
But I'd rather bet pocket tens than ace king because with pocket tens we unblock the kings.
True.
And if we want our opponent to be holding king jack, king queen, then I'd rather be betting here. And hoping and getting called by one of those hands rather than, betting a hand where we block the hand that we want him to have.
That's true. I mean, although, what else could he have, I guess, besides, we've established, king, queen, king, jack, and then, queen, jack?
So maybe, he could have a misdraw. And if we check, we do get him to bluff those misdraws some amount. But I don't know. I kind of just want to put it in here and hope we get called by a king.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Is there any consideration to checking to protect our checking range?
But again, if we're doing that, I'd almost rather do that with ace king or a hand that's a hand that has a king that blocks some of his top pairs and weights his hands more towards bluffs.
Yeah,
right. It's just one of these things where yes, I understand that he is a player who can value bet, but we have gone raise under the gun. Bet flop into two players, bet turn large into two players. Our line looks quite strong. If we check, I don't know if he should go for value with a king moderate, a king decent kicker.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. Well, in the moment I did jam. I was just after the fact, I thought to myself, I was like, I wonder if that was kind of an unbalanced jam or if, I should have considered checking there because I didn't really in the moment. I just kind of put it in. But anyway, he tanks for a long time, but does end up folding.
Okay, so he probably did have a king.
For sure. What else, right?
But I do think if we check it, it is going to get checked back a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Just because of how strong our line looks. It's a little bit different if, maybe if if we had a different sort of hand where the turn checked through and the river made our hand. And then, then we might consider checking because our line is a lot weaker, where we might actually be incentivized to go for value more. But here, it just seems like when we go bet, check, it looks a lot like either a trap or a misdraw.
Right, in which case, why would he bet, right?
Right. So. It's tough to imagine. It's tough to imagine that we're going bet, check with a hand that he has beat that will call his bet.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm happy to jam here and get called a lot, but we were just talking about tournaments, people don't want to call off their whole stack with one pair.
Absolutely. No, yeah. So I don't know. Okay, I guess I played it as good as I could have. I don't know. I really thought about it after because it would have made a big difference in my tournament, obviously, if I had doubled up at that earlier.
I hear doubling up is good for tournaments.
Doubling up is good. So, all right. Well, that's what I got. What do you got for us, Josh?
Okay, so I got a hand from 1-3. This is going to be at Chasers. In New Hampshire. This was a fairly deep stack game. This was from a little while ago. I'm the effective stack at 650. The straddle is usually on intermittently in these games. Some tables are more prone to others. They're usually anywhere between 2 and 5 players who are open to putting on the straddle in an 8-handed game. There's almost always one or two who are clearly just there to classic live nittier players who are just kind of there to call a lot and see what they can do. So, which is fine. That's not an indictment of their play, but just always, if you've listened to this podcast long enough, that we love straddling, brings in the action, all that good stuff. But we're playing 1-3 at Chasers. Still been enjoying Chasers a lot. Been going pretty well for me recently. Really like the games. It's a fun time. In this particular hand, it's going to start with a middle position limp from under the gun limp. It's an 8-handed game at Chasers, so middle position and under the gun are kind of the same thing. I am in the cutoff with Queen 9 of diamonds, and I like to raise here, which is probably close to the edge of the ISOing range.
I would say it's well with, like, I don't think you would ever fold that, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you know, a worse suited queen, you can, like, also overlimp sometimes from the cutoff and button.
Yeah, I hate doing that, but yes, I recognize it is allowed.
Well, good. Well, so anyway, you know, I kind of hope to get it heads up more or less. Of course, this is live 1-3, so the small blind, big blind, and limp are all call.
Yeah.
And you're all of a sudden remembering why you play cash instead of tournaments.
No, I don't really. I mean, that's the thing. You don't actually tend to have that much like multi-way nonsense in tournaments, which, like, you know, is kind of nice in a way. But anyway, yeah. I guess, like, at this point in my poker career, if you could call it that, I've become somewhat comfortable with multi-way spots because I play low stakes live cash.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. Is, you know, multi-way spots are one of those things where, like, when you're running badly, you just curse them because you're like, wow, it's impossible to make money in these games. Because, you know, you are multi-way, you're against 3 different ranges, so you're going to win fewer hands. But when you do win hands, you just make way more. Because there's so much money in the pot to start. And, like, the people who call you are going to have stronger ranges because it's multi-way. Theoretically, not always.
Yeah. It's possible I haven't realized that, or I haven't had that experience, I guess, as much as you, because the game at Orange Park is so short. Because, like, playing 100 big blinds deep, you know, there's only so big the pots tend to get. Obviously, when you get real, like, sometimes I'll play, it'll get really deep with 1 or 2 people, but rarely are there, like, 3 deep stacks involved in one hand.
That's a good point, and there is sort of its own dynamic to having, you know, like 2 deep stacks and, like, 1 short stack in a pot together.
I actually hate that dynamic.
I also don't really like it, but, like, sometimes it's interesting where, you know, you can make isolating plays that wind up, like, folding out, like, a lot of equity from the deep stack and just getting it heads up with the short stack with, like, a decent hand that plays well against them, but poorly multi-way, right? Like, if you flop top pair, decent kicker, like, you don't really want to get it in with another deep stack for 200 big blinds, but you're happy to get it in for, like, 40.
Sure, that's a fair point.
So
okay, so you have, what's the pot now?
So we're going 4 ways to a flop, $60 in the pot. The flop is going to come down 8-8-6 rainbow with 1 diamond. 8 of diamonds, 8 of clubs, 6 of hearts.
8 of diamonds, 8 of clubs, 6 of hearts, and you have Queen 9 of diamonds.
And it checks to me, and I decided to check it back, which, looking at it now, I don't really like, because I think that this is actually a pretty good bluffing candidate on this board. Like, I'm not going to have all that many, like, good bluffs here. Like, 9-10 suited is, like, pretty much it. And, like, this hand is, like, a decent, like, a double backdoor and 2 overs is pretty good.
Right, and you have so many cards that'll give you equity. A jack, a 10, like a 7. Like, you have so many barrel cards. I actually really like a bet here.
Yeah, I like a bet too. I think I would definitely be betting 20 here a whole lot. And it's also a hand where, like, you know, if we get, like, raised pretty significantly, like, we can fold also, like.
But you can also call some check raises with this hand, which is actually kind of nice.
That's true.
It plays, especially in position, you know, it plays so well. And it's gonna be so easy, you know, to play. Yeah. So okay.
I agree. I think I should have bet this. Like I said, this was from a couple weeks ago before I had done a little bit more studying on good aggressive spots. But looking at this now, I'm like, wow, did I really check this back? What you know. Well, you know, I was really thinking, multi-way, totally missed. But really, I didn't totally miss. Like, 2 over, like, my queen and 9 are quite possibly live. And obviously, we have, like, boatloads of backdoor equity.
Yeah, I mean, this is not your exact situation, but from out of position, I talk about I've been trying to use a more polar betting strategy multi-way. I will tend to bet my strongest hands and then my double backdoors, and then, like, check most other hands. I'll bet some stronger draws, like a mix of a few, like, flush and straight draws in there. But for the most part, I've been trying to use junky draws and nutted hands and multi-way pots to bet from out of position.
Yeah, I mean, even out of position, I think you can also. I tend to bet like strong draws also. Like I don't mind betting, backdoor draws, strong value, and then some strong draws you can bet. I don't know. Do you tend to check raise the like if you had a nut flush draw on the flop, are you like playing that as a check raise or a check call?
It's gonna depend on the board and how many good check raise candidates I have. Like if there's, but like probably yes. For the most part, I'm going to be playing it as check raise.
Right. Well, that makes sense. Okay, so as I say, I think it makes a lot of sense to bet. I think we're both aligned on that. But I don't in this case. So as played, we see a turn, which is a fantastic card. It's the 10 of diamonds. It makes me think, damn, I should have bet.
Okay.
So the 10 of diamonds now gives us a gut shot straight flush draw, which is great equity. The small blind checks, the big blind checks. The middle position limper now bets 25 into 60. Now, what do you like here?
I like a raise.
Yeah, well, I like a raise too, but I did wind up raising as is, as played. But one interesting dynamic that I feel like checking back flop and raising turn is like a really weird play that like I wouldn't. It's like tough to find value that you do that with.
Really, I feel like I will do that with a fair number of nutted hands where you're blocking a lot of continuance, like where you're blocking a lot of value. Like you might check like a top set or something and then play it exactly as that. You might also check something like aces and play it that way.
Yeah, I've been trying to move away from like checking back top set and like hands like that because like people just continue with so many hands. And like especially like it is kind of like a an awkward tell where like if you're you and I both tend to play pretty aggressively post flop as the pre-flop raiser. It's like if you're betting like all your misses, or especially heads up, like you're betting a lot of misses on boards that are somewhat favorable for you. You're betting a lot of thin value hands. So checking back top set is like definitely can set off alarm bells for people. And also it's like if I'm betting my misses and like building this image of betting a lot, then I want to build pots with my strong hands also.
That's true. I agree. I mean, I think it's just a question like you're asking like how can I be more balanced with my like check back flop and then raise turn lines. I do think using some nutted hands that like maybe it doesn't have to be top set. I don't know. But I mean on this board, like if you flop a boat here, are you betting it always? On 8-6-6, if you flop like 8-6 or 8-8.
Well, it's 8-8-6. So pocket six. I mean, pocket sixes. Yes, I'm probably always betting. An 8. I'm probably betting most of my 8s too. I guess like the check raise candidates here as value, or the raise candidates here as value, are really like ace 10. Maybe.
Sure.
Like I mean, ace 10 is definitely one, right? Like
I don't think it's crazy to check like a high overpair on this board sometimes either.
Yeah, that's true.
There's first of all not that much to get value from on the flop, and there's also not like you almost want them to pick up some equity, and there's also not much to protect against. I mean, first of all, like someone could have an 8, in which case you're actually in terrible shape. But I actually like checking aces here a decent amount, so you can have aces as played.
Sure, that's true. Aces and kings maybe, probably betting like jacks and tens and queens.
Sure.
But that's a good point. I probably wouldn't check aces and kings too much on this board. Would probably still prefer to throw out a small bet. But could definitely play it as a check flop. But I mean, if you're playing and if you're playing it that way, you're raising turn. I mean, if the whole point of checking back the flop is kind of pot control and there's not that many hands to get value from, does it make sense to play those as check back flop raise turn?
Well, there are now a lot more hands we're getting value from on this turn now that we're like 10 8 8 6. There is lots of tens that we can get value from. There's lots of straight draws. There's still flush draws that were there on the flop and are still there now. I think there's actually a lot more to get value from on this turn.
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, if he has a 10, oh my God, you're gonna make a bunch.
That's true. I mean, yeah, I do see that point, and I do see that point in raising, but it's one of those interesting things. Like, if you've got aces, right, and the board is 8-8-6, and the turn comes out like an offsuit deuce, and they lead into you, are you still raising? Are you probably playing that more as a call because like they didn't? There really was no opportunity for them to catch up.
Yeah, you might be better played as a call. You're probably right.
That's just it's just interesting, just prying your brain a little bit.
Yeah.
Always interesting in discussing strategy. Well, anyway, in this case, I do decide to raise. I put in a fairly small raise and make it 75.
Interesting. Why did you choose a smaller size?
Well, I don't know.
All right, fair enough.
Well, let's see. So he bet 25 into 60.
You missed an opportunity to say I was seeing where I was at.
I was seeing where I was at. I mean, it is sort of a half pot size raise, so it's not like a ridiculously small raise.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, if we're raising a lot of like, overpair type hands, maybe some like ace-10 type hands, we are kind of repping a fairly thin value range, so maybe our raise sizing should tend to be on the smaller side, especially if we're just trying to get value from a 10. So thinking about it, I mean, I think I probably wasn't thinking that in the moment, but
no, I see a good rationale. Yeah, even so, post hoc, I do see a good rationale for using a smaller raise size here. Because I actually, I think you're probably not checking like just an 8 on the flop much at all.
right.
So, so you're not really repping like a really thick value range, except for like specifically 8-6. So I actually do like a smaller size here. So okay, so does he call?
He does. Yes. So small blind folds, big blind folds, and the middle position player calls. So we've moved up to 210 in the pot. We've still got buckets left behind, 560-ish, and now the river, which is kind of where the most interesting decision happens. I think where the river rolls off a total brick. It's a 3 of spades, and if he checks to us, I think this is probably a decent bluff candidate.
Yeah, I mean you are blocking a lot of the like call a raise and then fold to a river bet hands.
That's
you are
true.
Blocking a decent number of those, like those draws, like that he might do this with, like queen jack.
Yep, or diamonds. Yeah, definitely blocking
queen
diamonds.
jack or diamonds. Maybe he wouldn't do this with queen jack actually, but certainly jack 9, which you are blocking. So I don't know. I don't know that it's the best bluff candidate in the world, but like, I mean, you gotta have bluffs, and I mean, he certainly. I mean, I guess you're dead. Like, if he has an 8, obviously he's never folding. So you're just hoping, like, you want to get specifically a 10 to fold. That might even be hard, though.
Yeah,
right?
So maybe, I mean, and this is not a terrible hand for, like, I mean, in terms of blocking, like, value, like, having a 9 and a queen does block, 10-9, 9-8, queen 10, which are all hands that he certainly could, that could limp call. So, it's interesting, it does block a lot of the hands that we want to fold, but it also blocks a lot of the hands that, like, miss and are beating us, but it also blocks some of his value. So it's interesting, but the interesting part about this hand is that he does not check to me. He bets 105. Half pot.
Half pot. It's interesting. Okay, so now you're like wondering, do you bluff jam?
So I was thinking like, wow. Like basically what I was thinking is like, is this lead call turn donk, like redonk river, is this like ever a missed draw? Or is it like always a 10 or an 8? And I'm not sure that it is ever a missed draw. But if so, then, I was kind of thinking about like, can I raise here again? Because that looks like extremely strong for me also.
That's true. Can we go through the board one more time for the listeners?
Yes. So I raised the cutoff over a limper with queen 9 of diamonds. Got 3 callers, as is tradition. Board came out 8-8-6 rainbow with 1 diamond, and it checked through. The turn came the 10 of diamonds, which improved us to a gut shot straight flush draw and a double gutter. The middle position, the limp caller, bet out for half pot-ish. We raised, only he continued. River totally bricked off the 3 of spades, and he now leads again for about half pot. We're sitting with plenty behind if we wanted to try and make a move. The effective stack at this point is 560, and he's betting 105 into 210. So I don't know. I think it's interesting. I think it's kind of a weird line. Like, I don't know if we have like better bluff candidates, but I also don't know that we have like any value candidate. Like, I don't know what hands we want to value raise on this board. Like, I guess 8-6 if we chose to check back 8-6. Sure.
Yeah, definitely 8-6.
Pocket eights, or one combo of pocket eights, we might check back.
Pocket eights. I mean, probably 9-7.
Probably 7-9. Although I probably would bet 7-9 with a backdoor most of the time on the flop.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, and I guess like you are blocking him from having that, so you are blocking the nuts. You're just blocking a lot of bluffs too. I mean, I don't know. I think you could probably go either way. I mean, what is like the ideal bluff here? The ideal bluff here surely must contain a 9, but probably not have diamonds in it. So it would be like, I don't even know.
Jack 9 suited is probably a good bluff candidate, because that also blocks like Jack 10, 9-10, 9. Like, it has kind of the same blocking properties that mine does, but it unblocks. You know, Jack 9 suited, not of diamonds, which I could raise on the turn as an open ender sometimes. Probably not a lot, but
so I mean that means you need more bluffs, and your hand contains a 9. So put it in.
But also like Queen 9 not diamonds is a better candidate, because Queen 9 is also a double gutter on the turn. So like Queen 9 of spades, Queen 9 of clubs, Queen 9 of hearts is probably a better candidate.
But even so, it's. I mean, I guess you don't have. Your point was like you don't have that much thick value to raise on this river.
Because
like
we shouldn't really have pocket 10s. I think pocket 10s we'd be betting on the flop.
Yep. I mean, would you jam here with aces?
I think that might. I don't know. I think that's actually pretty thin when he takes this line. But maybe this donk is like more indicative of a 10 than an 8 a lot of the time.
I think it could be an 8 that like didn't want to jam or like 3-bet the turn because he was afraid. Like,
he didn't want to fold out my overpairs, right? Because I think this would get the max value from my overpairs.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't love a jam, since you aren't really going to be jamming with much value here, I guess, and you probably have. I guess you do have enough bluffs as played, so you could probably just fold.
Yeah, well, I do just fold.
Oh, okay, good work.
You know, I was basically like, wow, this. I fold. I was basically like, you know, this line is just like so value heavy. Like, what am I jamming for value? Like, this is like such a weird line. You know, turn raises are like it's such a strong line from him, and I don't even necessarily know, because my line looks quite weird if I like jam here. I don't necessarily know that he's even folding a 10 a whole lot of the time.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, sometimes it's just fun, and sometimes you just got to put it in. You know, so if you did jam here, I don't think it could be that bad, to be honest with you, but. You know, I think it's fine to fold. So
yeah, so I do fold, but I was kind of thinking like, I wonder what that, you know, I wonder what I should have done, and that's kind of an interesting spot that he put me into with that donk.
Yeah, sometimes donking is okay.
Yeah, that is the takeaway for all of you listeners. Donk more.
Donk more. Definitely don't. Okay.
So let's move along.
Yeah, so I got another tournament hand, another really interesting one, versus a crazy Asian.
Awesome.
Yep. So very, very aggressive dude. He's just sat down like 2 orbits ago, and he has played half the pots, I think.
Okay. What's the blinds and the stacks looking like at this point?
The blinds are 600, 1200, 1200, and he is the main villain. He has a stack of 3200, and I cover quite a lot. Actually, I think I was quite deep at this point, and so I wasn't. And again, we were still in the rebuy period, so there were no ICM implications. Like, yeah. So
he's quite shallow, right? He's basically 25-ish big blinds.
Correct. He's fairly shallow.
Okay.
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. This is actually no. That's right. Yeah, I think this is the last level before the rebuy period. So yeah. Yeah. If I get like, you know, I'm thinking like I don't super want to get busted here, but hey, I cover him, so what the heck.
And do you think there are dynamics Are there any dynamics with like people playing like even more aggressive in sort of the last level or two before the rebuy period, where they just kind of think, "Oh, I want to either double up or rebuy here"?
That's possible. I don't know that I've observed that, but I haven't played a lot of tournaments, so I don't know.
I've played fewer than you have, so I was just curious if you noticed that in this, maybe that affected this fill-in.
Yeah, I don't know. Genuinely, I don't think it did because he had just bought in. He like bought it, like he literally just bought in the tournament. This was his first bullet, and he was just like going absolutely ham.
Okay, so awesome. Sounds like a fun guy to be at your table.
Yeah. So he limps from middle position to start off the hand, and he's been doing quite a bit of limp calling.
Okay.
And I'm in the low jack. And I open ace of diamonds, queen of spades to 4,000, which I really don't know how you're supposed to size over a limp in a tournament. So I've been going like 3x plus a little, and then been calling it good. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's it. You could probably even go just 3x. I don't really know.
Yeah, I don't know. I genuinely don't. Like all the tournament players listening to this are like, "Oh my god, get this guy in my tournament." I'm like, I really felt very out of my depth, but I had a lot of fun. So yeah.
And you cashed it. So
I cashed. So ha.
So suck it, Bankroll Burners listeners who are good at tournaments.
So I open it up to 4,000, and we get a call from the big blind, who is this same tight guy as before, and then the limper calls as well.
Okay, so. We're already getting shallow, right? We've got now 12K in the pot, or actually even a little more, 14K in the pot, and 28K behind. So the SPR is already 2. Basically,
that sounds right. Sounds right. Yep.
Okay. So,
but remember, this isn't like a cash game where like an SPR 2 just means you should put your stack in. So
right, but it does kind of mean like if you flop like an ace or a queen, you're pretty much like committed to going with your hand, right?
In a lot of ways, yeah. I mean, certainly, I think if I flop an ace or a queen, I'm probably like I don't think this would be a very interesting hand. I guess if I flopped an ace or a queen, but that isn't what happens. So,
okay.
Yeah. The flop instead is 10-9-5 all hearts.
And we do not have a heart.
We have no heart. So 10-9-5 all hearts.
No heart or commitment.
No heart or commitment to the game.
Okay.
Shout
out to Tony G.
Yeah, love Tony G. He was awesome in the $1 Million Game. So it checks to me, and I elect to check back,
which I think is fine. I think that multi-way, even in cash games, we can do a lot of checking with like air hands. Like I think you've got to structure your bluffs a little bit more around like actually having like equity.
Yeah.
Like queen jack, 7-8. Ace of hearts, king of hearts, those type of hands. I mean, especially multi-way. It's like, probably fine to exercise a little bit of caution.
Okay. I think that's right, and I agree. So, yeah, it checks around. So nothing too crazy on the flop. But the turn is the queen of clubs, so we do hit queen.
Okay.
So I'm pleased about this. And the big blind checks. I pretty much ruled him out having anything.
Sure. Sure.
I mean, yeah. He was interesting.
Well, and that's not quite fair. He could easily have a 10 that he has just already resigned himself to folding because the board was monotone.
That's true. Also, he could have a 10. He absolutely could. So, the big blind checks, and now the middle position player bets 5,500. That's about a third pot, leaving himself with pot behind.
Right. So if we call, well, if we
call, it'll be pot behind, assuming big blind doesn't also call, which I am assuming.
Which just seems fair.
I've ruled big blind out from calling in this hand.
Okay.
And I think, so what do you think here? Do you like a call? Do you like a smooth, or do you want to rip it?
I think I like calling. I don't know. It's interesting. If he's like super aggressive, the thing is like if he's super aggressive, I feel like calling and then like calling off any non-heart rivers is just going to be best for us, because like if his bluffs here are probably going to be mostly hands with like one heart that might just barrel off the river and like that we can just pick off. Whereas if we jam here, he may not call for a pot-sized raise with a hand that we're beating. He could have some hands that kind of works the other way, where he's got like queen. If he has queen jack or something, then getting all the money in now is what we want to do.
Yeah,
but it's interesting. Like I feel like from how you've described this villain, if he's kind of super aggro, trying to like bluff people off all the time, then I'd rather be calling in position.
Yeah, I agree. I think probably against this player type, calling is... But I don't know. Like, I think about, like, the crazy Asians I've played with before, and they do love to call withdraws.
That's true. You will definitely get called by all his queens. You might get called by tens, like Jack 10.
Yeah.
Jack 10 with a heart is definitely calling you.
Right.
Jack 10 without a heart is, like, probably calling you. I mean, I do know what you mean about this player type.
Yeah.
And like there definitely are hands to protect against. Like if so maybe you're right that even though he's super aggressive, that also means that he will probably be fairly call happy.
Yeah.
At this point.
Yeah. I also think like in a tournament, I mean, if this were later, especially, I might like a jam here even more to like take the pot down, which is something you really should never do in a cash game. But
jam to see where you're at and take the pot down.
Yeah, but in a tournament, there is some value to just simply denying equity.
Right. Right. Just cleaning up the equity because of ICM in late stage tournaments, where it's like chips matter a lot, and just winning some chips is better. Winning some chips 100% of the time is a lot more better than winning more chips less of the time.
Yes. Yes.
Well done, Josh. You're a tournament master.
Tournament master, Josh. So, yeah, I think there is some merit to a jam here. Honestly, even perhaps at this stage of tournament. But I do end up just calling. I kind of called pretty quickly, and this was one of those hands. Like I really feel like I should have thought about it more. Because I think that,
I guess to me it kind of hinges on how much air he's betting on the turn. Like if
he had a ton of air. I hadn't seen him like showdown air. I'd seen draws.
Okay, then I probably do. Then I probably am on board with the jam, because I think if he's just like betting every hand here on the turn once the flop checks through, which like there certainly is a player type that is doing that, right? That's like literally betting all of their hands that are like unpaired, or even like hands that have a pair. Like they're just betting literally 100% of the hands they have at this point. Then I definitely lean towards a call, because like we want him to continue with those hands that literally have zero equity or very little equity against us.
Right.
But if he's more an aggressive player who's doing so more with draws, then I'm more on board with the jam.
Yeah. So anyway, I do think it's an interesting spot. I do think the turns. There's more to the turn than I think meets the eye at first. But
yeah, I think that's fair. And as we kind of said before the flop, like we're so shallow, it is like top is good enough to go with.
Right. So the river bricks off. It's the 4 of spades.
Okay.
And he does think about it for a little bit. But he goes ahead and puts it in. She shuts for pot.
Okay.
And is there... So are you just like... I mean... yeah, what are you doing here, I guess? Like, are you just saying, like, first we have top, we have to call? Like...
I mean, probably. I don't really know if there's, like, tournament implications here. Like
there's some, because like if I call here, so I'll say like would basically be back at like around starting stack if I call here, which would kind of suck.
Right.
But
which would be like 20 bigs basically.
Yeah. So, or less.
But like if we've seen him be like, if everything bricks, like he should have some hands. He probably does have some hands with like just the ace of hearts, just the queen of hearts, like, or just the king of hearts rather. I mean, he could even be doing this with like a queen that he just like. I think we also just beat some value. Like he might be doing this with like queen jack, king queen that he just thinks is best.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and I'll tell you, like in game, I called pretty quickly. It was just again, this is one of those like after the fact. I was like, I feel like I should have thought about this more because I did call and he was pretty slow with his reveal, but he slowly rolls over Jack 8 offsuit with that Jack of Hearts.
So he had a straight. He turned a straight.
He turned a straight, which I was like, I literally did not consider that hand. Which I'm like,
but I mean, I think especially like if our decision on the turn is between call to let him keep bluffing brick rivers or jam to get the money in now, then we pretty much have to call brick rivers.
That's a fair point.
Like if we're not considering folding on the turn, and like we think he's the aggressive type who is going to be bluffing missed draws at the appropriate or even perhaps higher than appropriate frequency, then I think we just have to close our eyes and call. I mean, if he shows up here with Jack 8 offsuit, he's probably got plenty of hands that we're beating that he takes this exact same line with.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, look, man, you should. And again, I'm not a tournament expert, but that's not a tournament hand. Like, you know, in cash games, I'll see that kind of bull crap all the time. But like, I don't like even from the bad players in the tournaments. I very rarely see hands like that. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
People who don't know what they're doing in tournaments still play a much tighter range than they do in cash games. So,
people kind of understand that they should default to high card power.
Yeah. So I was very surprised. Like, I was like, oh, I didn't even see that.
And I mean, King Jack is a hand that is more reasonable that he could maybe play this. That is another value hand, right?
Sure. I guess I did. Yeah, that's fair.
But I think that Queen is just like a brutal card, and you know, that is what it is. I don't think there's anything. I don't think there's anything wrong with how you played it.
Yeah. Anyway, I just thought it was one of those hands that maybe had a little more depth to it than I gave it in the moment because I was just like, oh, well, rip me. But all right. We can move along.
Perfect. So let's move on to the last hand of the episode. This is one that I played yesterday. It's another hand from Chasers. Again, this is it's kind of an interesting dynamic to it, Chasers, because like again, as I said, like playing the 1-2 game usually when I'm on the list for 1-3, and it's just like it is kind of crazy how different the games are. Where like 1-3 definitely has more player, like even between 1-2 and 1-3, which like sounds like they should basically play the same, but like they don't. There's like 10 tables of 1-2 and like 2 tables of 1-3, and the players who play 1-3 are definitely like more willing to splash around, more willing to straddle. Like they're not going to be short stacking as much. They're usually 1 or 2 players who, you know, are thinking players to some extent. So it's just kind of a really interesting dynamic to me, and might be funny to some people to think like, well, I mean, it's literally 1-2 versus 1-3. How can it be that different?
No, but it is. I mean, I experienced the same thing with like 2-2 versus 2-5. I mean, look, the games in Jacksonville are, I mean, the low stakes games are soft, you know, 2-2 or 2-5, they're both soft, but the degree of there is a huge difference between 2-2 and 2-5.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, it's interesting. I think from what I've observed, and I haven't played the 2-5 game at Chasers yet, but I think the difference between 1-3 and 2-5 is probably less than the difference between 1-2 and 1-3.
That's interesting, actually. Okay.
Which is weird. But anyway, in this particular hand, this was a great table. Most players were straddling. As I said on the last podcast, it's awesome that Chasers 1-3 game. They do 2 bomb pots every dealer, which just definitely like ramps up the action. Just because, you know, bomb pots are great for action.
Yeah, bomb pots are great. I feel like 2 in orbit would like overwhelm me, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, so it's 4 an hour basically.
Yeah.
Which, you know, can feel bad when you lose them over and over. I've been running quite hot in bomb pots recently, so I haven't minded so much.
Yeah, well, as long as you're running good.
Yeah.
Okay. Is this hand a bomb pot hand?
No, it is not. I do not have a bomb pot hand yet. Although that will be fun, and I'll see if the thing about bomb pot hands is it's tough to find bomb pot hands that have like meaningful decisions and also go all 3 streets, because like strong hands that are very strong wind up just being like with all the money in on the flop or the turn a lot of the time. Yeah,
that's fair. So. Okay.
But hopefully we will bring one eventually. Well, so in this hand, the straddle is not on, so we're playing 1-3. The effective stack in this hand is going to be the button, which is about 500, and the max buy-in in this game is also 500, which is awesome. Love a 1-3 500 game. I cover slightly. The low jack is going to start things off with a limp. And I raise with King of Diamonds, 10 of Clubs from the cutoff to 15.
Totally standard.
Yep. And once again, as you would expect, we get 3 callers.
Nice. The blinds call?
Nope, the button calls. The big blind calls and the low jack calls. So, which is annoying when the button calls.
Sucks.
You know, definitely was hoping that the button folds, you know, if...
This is the worst thing. The worst part about offsuit broadways is getting called out of position. It's like
right, and that's what I was thinking. Is I raised from the cutoff, we'd expect the button to fold like a pretty decent amount of the time. He was playing, as far as I could tell, fairly ABC. Older gentleman, he was definitely enjoying the game, but I didn't necessarily think he was going to be doing a whole lot of calling.
Okay. All right, so we're now, what is it, like 60?
Pretty much 60. I'm happy to sort of keep it rounded, given that there's blinds, but there's also rake, and so yeah, pretty much 60. So plenty behind, but another fun 4-way multi-way pot, which are just you can see why I like these games at Chasers. People love seeing flops. It's great.
Absolutely.
And the flop here is going to come 10 of diamonds, 8 of spades, 7 of spades.
10 of diamonds, 8 of spades, 7 of spades. Okay.
And we've got king of diamonds, 10 of clubs. So we've got top pair, good kicker, no spade. It is obviously a very dynamic board.
I'm as a sticky situation right off the bat, I would say I don't love our hand.
Well, it checks to me, which is a good, it's not much, but it's something.
It ain't much, but it's honest work.
I decide to check here.
I'm always checking this hand.
Yeah, I mean, I think if the button bets and everyone else folds, I can definitely call. If the button bets and like one or more of the other players check, like we might just have to like fold. If someone raises, we're definitely folding.
Yeah, if it goes bet raise, I think you have a fairly trivial fold. But I don't think you can fold to a bet call. That might be a bit too nitty. But
that might be right. You may be right.
But I think if it goes bet raise, you can very easily lay this down. But what does the button do?
The button checks back.
Okay, the button checks. All right, great.
So on these boards, and the big difference for me here, right? Like just for our listeners, if people are thinking, well, you have top pair, you should be betting. You said you're trying to play aggro, whatever. Fair enough. I think one big reason to not bet these boards so much is because they're on a board, especially with like 3 to a straight already. There's so many cards that like drastically change the like best hands and the texture of the board that like top pair, especially from out of position, is like not likely to be the best hand by the river, and people are not going to be folding the hands that like can benefit from that sort of equity.
That improve to the best hand.
Yeah. So just kind of some notes there.
We don't have a lot of ways to improve with our specific holding is the other issue.
True.
We don't have a draw. We can make 2 pair, which could be dead already.
Right.
So like, we can't make a very strong hand. So it's definitely like we have a marginal made hand for sure. So.
Right. Exactly. So it's just one of those interesting things where boards like this, you are just allowed to really polarize and check a lot of hands that have, good showdown value and kind of evaluate and look for, look to start getting value as the board gets brickier.
What would you want to bet on this board?
I mean, possibly like combo draws. Like if I had like ace 9 of spades.
Mm-hmm.
I might start betting sets. I probably would bet sets.
Yeah, I think if you were first to act like post flop, like if you were EP and you only had action behind, I might check 100% of hands.
Yeah,
I might play this as a check 100. Just thinking about like if we have 3 people that behind, like any of the strong hands we super want to bet, or like crazy combo draws, or like obviously the junky draws we got to have in there too. But any of those hands that we want to bet might just be played better as a check raise from the earliest position.
Yeah. Would you consider this is another spot where I sometimes mix things up or get confused or overplay my hands. Are you ever playing like aces as a check raise? Like if you have an overpair here, are you ever like check raising, or you tend to proceed with a bit more caution? Because I tend to play a more
like are you saying asking like
check raise versus check call?
Have many like I don't think you would have many check raises from your position is the thing, like because the button's the only one left to act behind. So right. I don't like a lot of check. Like I don't even know what I would check raise. I guess from where you are. What
if you had like aces, and if we had raised aces from early position, and we got 3 callers who were all in position on us, and this board comes out, and it checks to the button who throws out a bet. Are you kind of ISO raising, or are you kind of playing because that's like a position that just totally sucks with aces, right? Like
yeah, I might play it.
Like maybe a small raise to try and clean up the other players in the hand. But then it's like...
so awkward.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think if like next to act bet and it went like fold, I would probably just call. But maybe if it goes like check button bets, we're supposed to raise to isolate. Like not a big raise though.
Right.
But
That's kind of what I was thinking is,
I think that intuitively that's what I want to do, but I could be dead wrong. Solver nerds might be like, what is this guy saying? Like,
Solver nerds won't know what we're talking about unless they've signed up for Prometheus Poker.
They're not paying us. We can't talk about them. But yeah. Yeah, that's fair. So I don't know. I really don't know if that's really a tough spot.
Yeah, this is just like not a board I'm all that interested in, but like we have top pairs, so we also like, you know, if it like keeps checking through, like we can probably get one street of value later, or we may just have the best hand if the board gets super ugly and checks like all three streets.
Yeah. So what happens on the turn?
So the turn continues the ugliness. It is the Jack of Diamonds. Wow. So it introduces a second flush draw in the diamond draw, and it also is now a one-liner to a 9.
Yeah, any 9 makes a straight. Of course, Queen 9 is the nuts. Okay.
And once again, it checks to me, and once again, I elect to check. I mean, we don't even have top pair anymore.
Sure, yeah.
And now the button throws out a bet of 30 into about 60. And both other players fold.
I think we can call here and then plan to check fold river.
I agree. That's kind of my plan is, I mean, especially, and something was already, I was kind of already thinking, like, the button is kind of the only one who can have, like, weird bluffs here. Because, like, he might just do that when it goes check to him on 2 consecutive streets. You know, especially live players can definitely interpret that as, like, wow, nobody has anything. I'm just going to, like, take this down right now with, like, my junk.
And he might also have run into a flush draw. You know, run into a flush draw here. So,
yes, yeah, that's true. I mean, I do have the King of Diamonds, which I think is kind of relevant. But, you know, I do have a pair. I think there are hands that we're beating. I think he can definitely have bluffs here. So I call.
He also could just be betting to see where he's at. I mean that quite seriously. Like, he might just be like, well, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out if Queen 10 is good here. So,
yeah, he could have Queen 10. He could also have run into a Jack, to be fair.
Sure, absolutely.
You know, although live players less likely to be betting jacks, like a Jack on this board, I would say. Like I feel like
most of the time when a live player bets a Jack on this board, they would use I feel like they'd use like a big sizing. Like I see so many live players who like when there's a draw heavy board, they just bet enormously, which is sort of right in a lot of ways. Like,
it is.
You are supposed to bet bigger on draw heavy boards, but they'll bet very large with marginal hands.
But there is kind of an interesting dynamic where, you know, one kind of piece of advice that I heard recently in terms of like sizing your bets is a lot of the time, rather than, you know, variable sizing is like not necessarily right. Like,
right.
I think this piece of advice, this kind of rule of thumb, was really interesting to me because it's not something I think either of us have done a lot, which is really more figure out what your bet sizing should be with all of your hands and then decide if your hand is good enough to bet at that sizing.
Yeah, I think that's you're right. I don't do that. It's a very smart way of thinking about this. I mean, I've sort of like plugged that leak in myself a little bit by basically always using large turn sizing, except on very specific boards. Like I don't tend to split the turn size much, but I agree that it's still the wrong way of thinking about it. Like being like, oh, I want to bet my hand. Like, no, I should think about like, what is the bet size that's appropriate for this board, and then like, does my hand suit it? It's definitely a better way of thinking about it.
But obviously that's kind of theory, and there are good deviations and exploitations you can take where, like, if, you know, against live opponents, if you think like, you know, if you have reads on players, which is a lot of live players, you know, might be more inclined to call smaller bets with like marginal value hands, you know, you can, and they're not really paying attention or aware of the sizings that you're taking. You know, a lot of the time you can, like, you know, if you bet large, if your opponents are always folding to large bets and always calling small bets, then you should bet small with value and bet large with bluffs, right? Like at the most extreme example. So yeah, there are deviations to take, but just an interesting aspect where really, you know, if a player has a Jack here and they want to bet it, they probably should bet big. But I don't know. I don't know if you should be betting Jacks here.
Yeah, I don't know that it's correct to bet a Jack on this board. But okay, so And I know we said we would probably check fold river. I also think there's, depending on what the river is and what kind of sizing he takes, you may be able to check jam river also. But anyway, it sounds like you called here.
Yep. I do call, and the river now I think comes a pretty interesting card. It's the 4 of diamonds. So the board is now 10 of diamonds, 8 of spades, 7 of spades, jack of diamonds, 4 of diamonds. So the backdoor flush completes. We've got king of diamonds, 10 of clubs. So we've now got second pair. We also have the king of diamonds, which is a blocker to the diamonds.
Mm-hmm. And 5-6 gets there.
And 5-6 gets there. I decide to check here. And the button now bets 65.
Half pot. Best size. All right.
Once again, around half pot.
Well, that means he's so we can't interpret this as like betting to see where he's at. You know, he must like his hand. Or, I mean, he could be bluffing, or he likes it, or he has a straight here, probably. Although, who knows if he has queen 9 specifically.
So this kind of, my thought was kind of like, you know, I kind of ruled out a jack at this point. Like, from this particular player, I don't think he'd be betting a jack on the turn and the river, especially when a flush completes. Not that it's super likely that I have diamonds here, but you know, I just kind of a live thing is people don't bet as thinly as they should. Not that I think betting a jack here would be right anyway, but anyway, I basically discount a jack.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
And I mean, I also think that like from a live player like this, like I'm also kind of taking 9s out of his range a bit more, because I think that some players will like check back or take a smaller sizing with just a 9 at this point.
I don't know if I agree. I've seen a lot of like questionable activity occurring with like bad straights, because we were like, I have straight, I bet. So,
do you think he'd be betting 5-6 here?
I don't think he has 5-6.
But if he had it,
some players would.
Yeah. So what do you think here? Do you think we can fold? Do you think we can turn our hand into a bluff? Do you think we have enough value to call?
I don't think we can call, no. Well, but like, what do you think he's bluffing here? I guess, like, what are his bluffs? It's like missed front door flush draw, I guess. But you would think he would bet that on the flop?
I would think that. I mean, I was thinking maybe missed front door flush draw, or maybe, like, again, I did kind of think, you know, this player is, like, being on the button when it checks to him twice, he is the only player who can have, like, a random airball live bluff.
Sure, yeah.
Now, would he bet it for 2 streets? Maybe, maybe not. But it's interesting, because I feel like, you know, when he bets turn and river, like, you know, like, I feel like if he checks back river, we almost, like, are going to lose to a jack a lot more.
Yeah, I don't think, like, we're going to win a lot when he checks back river. But, like, and you're right, he has some airball bluffs here, but we have to think about the pot odds we're being laid. We're getting 3-1. Slightly worse. We're getting basically 3-1.
Yeah.
Like, is he airball bluffing this 25% of the time? Like, middle-aged, sounds like he's like a middle-aged guy. I don't know.
I don't know either. It's interesting. I mean, I thought about raising and turning, like, but, like, I don't think raising is just interesting, because I think, like I don't really like raising. And the reason is because I don't think he's folding a 9.
You don't think he would fold a 9?
I don't really think he would fold a 9.
And right.
And then I don't really think he's betting worse value than a 9.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like our hand necessarily as a bluff candidate. I mean, it's nice to have a diamond. I'd rather have king queen because we block the nuts. The nut straight, rather.
Right. Or king 9.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean,
but I guess we probably king 9 offsuit. We're probably not opening.
Yeah, not really. So I mean, but we could have. Well, yeah. So, but we don't have that many good bluffs here either. I guess, like, we have our own, like, missed spades, which aren't betting flop, which I think there's a decent amount of those. Wow, but what are they? Like queen 10 of spades, but well.
But I mean, do we have that many hands that we want to raise for value here? Like, that we play as a check call on the turn and then raise river for value?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think we'd be check raising most of our value on the turn. I think we'd be check raising diamond draws a lot on the turn.
That's true.
So it's another spot where it's like,
we might check call some diamond draws on the turn,
yeah,
like pair plus diamond draw. Probably.
Yeah, ace eight of diamonds.
Yeah,
sure.
So I don't know. Again, like don't have that much value, so we don't need that many buffs. We don't really have that many buffs, but like I don't know. I think again, this is one of those spots that's pretty close. Like I think jamming here isn't terrible, but I also think giving up is fine. I think calling here is probably a mistake.
Well, I call because I don't know. The line just looks really fishy to me. Like, and I just don't love jamming because I don't think we're ever like folding out a 9. Like I don't really think bluffing here. I mean, maybe it's just really an exploitative play where it's like I don't think he's ever betting worse value. I don't think he might bet a set here once in a while, but one would think he's betting every set he has on the flop.
Sure.
So, like the only value hands I really think he's betting are a 9. Right. And then like I think it's just a weird line, and he probably I just do think he is gonna have some bluffs once it goes check turn, like checks to him again on the turn. So I don't know. I get curious, and I kind of think like this is a weird like live spazzy hand where I feel like I can maybe be good 1 in 4 times. So I call, and he says the words that I'm most hoping for, which are good call, and shows Queen 6 offsuit.
Oh,
so I don't know what was going on with this gentleman on this day, but he did just show up with some junk.
Yeah. I mean, I think you have... Yeah, I mean, look, good call, obviously. Worked out. I think you have a lot of better hands to call with, though, probably.
I agree. I mean, I think we probably play, like, over pairs. But, like, also having a 10, like, is actually quite good because it blocks 10-9.
Sure.
Which is, like, a big, obviously a big, like, a lot of... That blocks, like, 9. A good portion of 9s.
Yeah, that's true. That's true as well.
And it blocks King 9, but, every hand blocks some 9s.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I feel like you could probably call with a lot of jacks here, like Queen Jack, King Jack are probably better calls too.
That's, I guess, yeah. I mean, Queen Jack I think is a better call because blocking Queen 9 is good.
King Jack is probably the same as, King Jack is probably the same as your hand.
Right. Exactly. Because I don't think he's really ever betting a jack this way for 2 streets.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where it came from. It's kind of a live exploity hand where I'm like, this is just like a weird line that I don't really believe him.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Look, nothing wrong with getting curious, and maybe I'm being too nitty here. So
I don't think it would be a mistake to fold either, because like he did bet into 3 people on the turn and then continue the river. So theoretically, that is showing a lot of strength. But it is one of those things that we've kind of talked about extensively in the past where live players, when it gets checked to them twice, will just start bluffing.
Yep, you're absolutely right.
So that's kind of something I was thinking about as well. So, just got curious and made the bluff catch. But yeah, that was an interesting hand.
Nice. Well, it seems like we played our hands okay this episode, which is really unusual. Not nearly enough punting. So.
Well, I blame it on your tournament performance. You were a little nervous. You didn't have time to get comfortable enough to start punting.
Oh yeah, well I did punt off my stack at the end. I just made like a terrible call of an all-in. So that's classic tournament puntage. It was like one of those things that's very standard in a cash game. It's like, yeah, I can call off a short stack shove with a medium pocket pair, but like not really supposed to do that in late stages of tournaments, as it turns out. So.
Well, that's life. You got away with the cash, had a good weekend, and that's that.
Yep. Well, thank you everyone for listening in. Please leave a comment below on how you could have played those hands better. Please like the video. Please subscribe. We'd really appreciate it.
And in this case, for this episode, please let us know how you approach multi-way pots, especially on wet boards. We clearly don't know what we're talking about, so please enlighten us.
Yeah, if you had aces and there's 3 people left to act, what are you doing on 10-8-7 flush draw? What are you doing?
Who knows?
Bye, everybody.
Have a good one.